It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Brogna, 21-9 and feeling fine. Welcome to episode 473 of Rico Brogna. This episode of Rico is why it's really important to subscribe to the Rico Brogna, because you're probably used to us doing Ricos, whether you consume it live on YouTube or you download it in your podcast feed, coming out late at night and then possibly really early in the morning. But sometimes we pop a Rico out in the middle of the day. So this is a very special Wednesday morning / afternoon pop edition of Rico Brogna. But wherever you're listening to us and whenever you're listening to us, we appreciate it. Two things we'll focus on today. Obviously, the Mets win against the Diamondbacks, game one of the 3-game series, as they continue to mash offensively. And also Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen did an interview with John Heyman the other day and said some very interesting things that we will analyze here on Rico Brogna. Let's start with the win against Arizona, because, and this is not me being negative when I say this, this is me being a baseball fan. I'm waiting patiently for the other shoe to drop. And that doesn't mean I think the Mets are going to fall apart. It doesn't mean I think they're going to lose 10 out of 13. I just assume that in baseball, you're going to cool off. All good teams, all great teams cool off. And this Met team, 30 games into the season, has not really had any period of time in which they've lost a lot of games. They've had a 2-game losing streak. They've had some stretches where they lose, 3 out of 5. But for the most part, we haven't seen, and I'm not trying to jinx them right now, I'm just trying to analyze what we've seen over a month. We haven't seen them struggle in any kind of consistent way when it comes to wins and losses. So when you look at the way they lost Sunday against Washington, you look ahead to the fact that the Diamondbacks are coming to town. They're a hot octane offensive team. You've got a tricky road trip coming up with St. Louis and then Arizona again. You've got the Yankees in a couple of weeks. I'm sitting here waiting, not for the Mets to collapse, for the Mets to struggle. And that's normal. And some of us will panic, and some of us will say, calm down, don't worry. And on Tuesday night at Citi Field, another electric crowd at Citi Field, they eliminated all doubt, really, in the second inning of this game, because the offense explodes all over Eduardo Rodriguez. They do it with the bottom of the order. Tyrone Taylor coming through out of absolute nowhere, jumping on a first pitch and ripping a double into the left field corner. And then we get to watch the beauty of Luisangel Acuna go from first to home and score easily on that rip double by Tyrone Taylor. Then you've got Jose Azocar, who's only in the lineup because Brandon Nimmo's got a stomach ache, and Azocar, behind in the count, rips a 2-out RBI single. For a team that has struggled hitting with runners in scoring position all year long, here is Jose Azocar, who, in my opinion, shouldn't even be on the roster, but I lost that battle. Shouldn't have been in the lineup if Brandon Nimmo doesn't get ill after a 9 RBI day, and he's ripping a base hit to right field. And then you've got Lindor also behind in the count, batting right-handed where he hasn't clicked yet this season, hitting a 2-run home run that really put the exclamation point on that 4-run second inning. And if that wasn't enough, here's Starling Marte hitting a bomb of a home run. If that wasn't enough, here's Luisangel Acuna getting a base hit in his 4th or 5th consecutive at-bat. And here's that man again, Tyrone Taylor, behind in the count, 1 and 2. How many hits did the Mets have behind in the count in this game? Coming through with an RBI single after Acuna showed the wheels and stole second. Like, this was an offensive, orgasmic thing to watch. Like, you've got the bottom of the order, you've got a guy struggling from one side of the plate, and you got everyone doing it behind in the count. It was incredible to watch. And jumping on a solid pitcher like Eduardo Rodriguez, giving David Peterson a little bit of wiggle room, not asking your pitching staff to be perfect, which at times they've asked them to do. So you get the offense on Eduardo Rodriguez. You tack on another one when Pete Alonso hits an absolute bomb, which reverse jinxed by Gary Cohen, who says literally before the pitch, boy, Pete hasn't hit a home run in a while. And when he said that, here's what's going through my mind. And this is a part of what's so amazing about 21-9. There are a lot of things, small things, big things, however you want to describe it, that are not fully clicking, and yet they're winning anyway. So Juan Soto gets a lot of attention because he's going to make $800 million. And Juan Soto, while he's hitting the ball hard, and I'm not overly concerned about him, and he did have a pretty good series against Washington where he was a finalist for the Rico, I'm the man now star of the series, he still hasn't hit a home run at City. He's still not driving in a lot of runs. I get it. He's hitting. The facts back that up, but he's not hitting to the expectations. I love the fact that the Mets are winning anyway. I think that's an incredible sign. So when Gary was talking about Pete and how Pete Alonso hadn't hit a home run in a while, I'm now thinking to myself, how great is that? There was a time last year where if Pete wasn't hitting a home run, he's useless. And that is an opinion a lot of Met fans had. Hey, Pete hits a home run, great. When he doesn't, he's a useless baseball player. Forget the defense for a second. We'll get to that in a minute or so. His offense and his at-bats have been so consistently good this year, whether it's drawing walks, whether it's going the other way, whether it's ripping doubles, that despite his home run slump, it hasn't mattered. It hasn't been a big deal. He's still productive. He's still hitting 340. He's still playing Gold Glove defense. So what's been so awesome to watch about Pete this season is he is no longer, at least for the first month of the season, obviously a lot can change, good and bad, he is not the one-trick pony that he used to be. So credit to Pete Alonso. And speaking of Pete Alonso, from jump in this game, if you want to define game one of this three-game series against the Arizona Diamondbacks in one way, you would define it with beautiful defense. And it started from the beginning. Leadoff hitter for the Diamondbacks, Padromo rips a single. They're set up, runner on first, nobody out, especially with Corbin Carroll and Grandin Grichuk, who's had a great year coming up. Suarez had the 4-home run game a couple days ago. Arizona could have jumped all over David Peterson. And Corbin Carroll rips a ball that should have been a base hit. It should have been first and third, nobody out to start the game, and instead Pete Alonso makes a headlong dive. That changes the inning completely. So we'll get into the fourth inning, which may have been the greatest defensive inning you'll ever see. But when you talk about the import of defensive plays, in the first inning of this game, it could have gone sideways for David Peterson if it wasn't for Pete Alonso making an incredible diving play. Then you get to the second inning. Gabriel Moreno, 1 out, nobody on, rips one. There's that man again. Another incredible diving play by Pete Alonso. And in this case, he completes the play that screwed him up on Sunday as he makes the perfect toss to David Peterson covering first base. So you add two really good defensive plays by Pete Alonso that were important because when he makes that play in the first inning, that changes the trajectory of this game. First and third, nobody out. I don't know what that game turns into. I don't know what David Peterson's performance turns into. And then you've got the fourth inning. And I would argue that it is not hyperbole. And many have already said this, so I will certainly not be the first because I wasn't live tweeting the game and we waited a day to do a Rico. So this has been said before, but you are right if you claim that is the greatest defensive inning you've ever seen because I cannot think of an inning where 3 outs are recorded in as insane a way as the 3 outs were recorded in the top of the fourth inning on Tuesday night, April 29th at Citi Field. First, you've got the Vientos dive, hit the ball in the air to Lindor, 5-6, 3 out, which was unique to say the least. Great play, but also really, really unique. Then you've got a catch of the year candidate in Tyrone Taylor. Because there is no way, and I don't know why, Keith Hernandez said this on the broadcast too, and I was doing the exact same thing. When that ball was hit off the bat by Lourdes Gurriel, I'm staring at the baseball, and I see where Taylor is, and I'm like, there's no way he's catching this. This is a double off the wall. Right now it's 7-0, so I'm not entirely worried, but okay, it's a double off the wall. And to watch him somehow run that down, I think that was more impressive than the dive. The fact that he made up the ground he made up on. As that ball was in the air, he makes a headlong dive. He makes an absolutely stupid catch. And that was catch of the year material. So the first out is circus-like, something you never see. The second one is just a headlong dive. And the third one, which was pretty good by Lindor, is like, whatever. You know, a Ray Ordonez sliding pickup by Francisco Lindor, who spoils us because since his bad start defensively, he is back to being Francisco Lindor. That was a marvelous defensive inning. And outside of the Vientos era, where Pete couldn't make the scoop, this was a near flawless defensive game. So think about what the Mets did. over the last 72 hours, and this should pump the hell out of you as a Met fan. They suffer as bad a loss as you're going to have. I don't care what your record is. You lead 7-1 in the seventh inning. You watch a ball fall because of the sun. You watch your bullpen implode. You watch your defense screw you on the final play. You fail to score with 2 on and nobody out. You add it all up. It was a terrible loss. And like I said, following that game, it's how you respond. And how have they responded? Oh, let's do some math. Why don't we? 27 runs in 2 games. And very little out of Juan Soto. And that's great. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. If they're getting 27 runs in 2 games and their best offensive player is not driving any of them in, that's a great sign of things to come. There's a lot of things about this Met team that will get back to the mean, if you will. Like the starting pitching is likely, even though it continues to, it's likely to not maintain the best ERA in Major League Baseball. And even if it does, it probably won't be in the low 2s, which it continues to be after 5 innings, 1 run from David Peterson. So we should expect that that's going to be more average. But you know what else we should expect? Juan Soto to be Juan Soto. And that is a great sign for this Met team. Wonderful win. David Peterson was weird, like 5 innings, 1 run, you'll take any day of the week. He only threw 85 pitches, but I get why Mendy took him out. He was getting hit hard. Like even in that 5th inning, give him credit for working out of it, but he gave up that 2 RBI double to Barossa, and then he was able to get the big outs, especially against Corbin Carroll, to limit the damage. But we talked about the defense and how many great plays they made. If that defense isn't there, this is a very different performance. And I'm not qualifying. 5 innings, 1 run. I will take it. Wonderful. But I'm more defending Mendy for why in the 6th inning, even with a big lead at that point, 8-1, saying I'm going to get him out. Because I think there were 2 things he was thinking about. Number one, I got to get Jose Butto right. And sometimes to get a guy right, you got to bring him into low leverage situations. And I thought that bringing Butto in 6th inning of an 8-1 game is the perfect time to do it. Let's see if we can get him right. And he looked different. Got a lot of swing and misses. I think on a slider, struck out 4 guys. It was a really solid performance by Jose Butto. Does he go back into the circle of trust? No. But the only way to earn your way back is to pitch well. So you get 2 innings out of Butto, and you think you get him right. And then you can throw Kevin Herget, who's only going to be here for a day, right into the weeds. Go get me 6 outs. Just don't implode, which it looked like he was going to do when he gave up a run in the 8th inning with 2 outs and nobody on, and gave up back-to-back hits in the 9th. But ultimately, even though Reed Garrett had to warm up, they get out of it. And so the Mets save their bullpen, which is so important during a stretch like this where A, you don't have any off days, and B, you're going to use an opener or bulk guy or whatever they plan on doing in game 2 of this series against Arizona. But they continue to roll. They continue to dominate at Citi Field, 13-1. I feel bad now when I go to games. Like I'm going to Wednesday night's game. There will likely be a drive home Rico right after, very safe drive home Rico. I'm almost saying I'm going to be bad luck. Though I'm undefeated too. I think I'm 6-0 or 7-0, and they're 13-1. So all is good so far with the New York Mets as they beat the Diamondbacks. The negative news before we get to Cohen's comments is obviously AJ Minter. It's kind of a surprise that it could be out for the season, but it just sucks. It sucks for him. It sucks for us. Minter had pitched well. Obviously, he had an injury history in the past. Remember, he missed a lot of time with the hip stuff. But right now, based on the way Mendy spoke before Tuesday's game, it doesn't sound good for AJ Minter. It puts more of an emphasis on the importance of signing Brooks Raley, which they did a few days ago, which we talked about. He's coming off Tommy John surgery. He loves being here. Clearly, there's a reason he wanted to come back. He's got one of the great country songs as his warm-up music. And so I hate this phrase, but I'll use it anyway. It'll be like a trade deadline acquisition when Brooks Raley makes his debut, which if I had to guess, I'm thinking it's going to be late June. Obviously, once he's put on rehab assignment, there's a 30-day clock, and the Mets should probably use most of that clock to make sure he is recovered and ready to go. So the negative news is it sucks to lose AJ Minter. It feels like a waste of a 1-year deal, essentially. But Brooks Raley was a key signing just a few days ago, and that's going to be one thing to keep an eye on come trade deadline. Speaking of trade deadline, Steve Cohen will comment on that. But I pulled a couple of clips from Steve's interview with John Heyman that I thought maybe you and the Rico audience would find fascinating. Let's start with Pete Alonso. Pete's having an outstanding year. We all know he has an opt-out. Here is Steve Cohen on the future of Pete Alonso.
He's gotten off to a fantastic start. He's a fan favorite. We're thrilled that, obviously he's on the team, and, we know he can opt out at the end of the year, and we'll deal with it then. I just dealt with this 2 months ago. Okay, do I have to start dealing with this again? Let it kind of, play itself out. Obviously Pete's going to explore his market like he should, and I'm supportive of that, and we'll see where it goes.
So I don't take that as he's gone. I take that as Steve Cohen is eliminating any thought to the idea that the Mets are going to extend him right now. And as much as I would love Pete Alonso back, I want Pete Alonso back. So if you told me today, yeah, the Mets and Pete Alonso have extended on a 5-year contract, I'd be ecstatic. But I also know why that doesn't make sense for either party. It just doesn't. If we take a step back and we try to be fair about it, it doesn't make sense for Pete because he is having a monster year. And if he can complete the monster year, wouldn't you want to take that to free agency and shop it around to every team? That's number one. Number two, if you're Steve Cohen, you don't know what his market is, even if he does have a monster year. There's a risk attached to it. So you'd be negotiating blindly if you're Steve Cohen, much like you'd be negotiating blindly if you're Pete Alonso, because I don't think you can use Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s contract. I don't really think you can use any contract. I think it's one of those scenarios where, unfortunately, we're going to sweat it out in free agency. He's going to go to free agency. We're going to hear a lot of rumors. We're going to hear big demands from Scott Boras, assuming he's still Pete's agent. And ultimately, it is going to come down to what someone is willing to offer him and how far the Mets are willing to go. There was a lot of talk during the offseason that, well, the Mets didn't want him back. And I never bought that. I never bought that when Joe B said it. I never bought it when Hoff said it, because what I responded with is, no, they want him back, but they're not going to negotiate against themselves. And they didn't. And ultimately, they made a deal, and they probably were very nice about the deal that they made. In this offseason, if name the team, it doesn't even matter, the Angels offer him a 5-year, $165 million deal, then the Mets have a choice to make. And that's the debate I guess we'll all have. Is that worth matching? Is that worth beating to make sure Pete comes back? That's what it comes down to. And so I think that those comments from Steve, half jokingly about the negotiations, but truthfully how annoying it was, is just a reminder, I'm not going to do it now. Have a big year, go to free agency, we'll see what happens. When Pete first re-signed, I said here on the Rico, I said it on the Fan as well, that my gut tells me he's only going to be here for a year. That the Mets got him back on a 1-year deal. He's in his 30s. They're going to let him go. The bigger the year he has, the more I feel less confident with that comment. More that I think the Mets will ultimately bring him back. And I'll tell you why. Number one, they're going to need him. I think when a guy has a great year, you kind of say to yourself, oh, boy, what are we without him? I mean, think about this team. They're 21-9. They've had a great year. Where are they without Pete Alonso? I guess the question would be, well, who's replacing him? If it's Brett Beatty, where are they without Pete Alonso? But I also thought that this past offseason, the Mets could have survived losing Pete from a PR standpoint. As much as I wouldn't have liked it, as much as I would have screamed about it, or Beningo would have screamed about it, they signed Juan Soto. And so most Met fans were still buying tickets. They were still giddy. They were still winning the PR battle of the offseason. If Pete has a big year and he goes into free agency, and there really isn't, looking ahead, any kind of big, sexy free agent the Mets are going to go after, I don't know if Steve Cohen, the businessman, is going to feel comfortable losing a face of the franchise kind of player and not having anything sexy to replace it with. It's just, yeah, we had a great year and we lost Pete, but we believe in Ryan Clifford. We'll see you later. I know David Stearns may be willing to do that. I'm not sure Steve Cohen will. So I think the bigger the year Pete has, the more from a business perspective, he may feel pressure to match whatever his biggest offer is. So ultimately, the takeaway from that is don't expect any mid-season contract extension. As much as we may want it, it's not going to happen. Another thing that Steve said, we talked about the deadline before, about the idea of maybe adding a left-handed reliever, especially with A.J. Minter going down. We'll see where the rotation is in July. Right now, it's too tough to tell. You're 21-9. Everything's clicking. It doesn't feel like you have a lot of holes. I promise you, come mid-July, there will be holes, and we will be screaming about it. So Steve was asked the question, all right, you've spent a lot of money. Will you continue to spend money potentially at the trade deadline?
Obviously, every dollar I spend costs me another dollar or $1.10. And so it's not cheap. Saying that, if we're competitive and we're in it, We'll see what's out there, and if we think there are pieces to add, I'm sure we will.
So you know what that means? You're damn right I'm going to spend. If David Stearns comes to me and says, let's go, we need this, we need this, we need this, I will go out and do it. So no surprise there. This will be an aggressive team at the trade deadline. I think they have actually good reason to be, not only because they're really good, but they may have a depth of middle infielder prospects that they could trade that have value, whether it's a recovering Ronnie Mauricio, whether it's Jet Williams. I think Luis Angel Acuna, you don't even call a prospect anymore because he's playing every day at the major league level, but they may have a surplus of prospects they could use as bait to try to add that last piece. Another thing Steve was asked about, and we talked a little bit about this on the Rico and on Evan and Tiki, and that is the idea of naming Francisco Lindor captain. So let's go right to the top with the owner of this team. What about Francisco Lindor being the captain of the New York Mets?
The whole captain thing, I think, has been sort of a media-driven discussion. And, the way I look at it is, let the locker room figure it out on its own. You have a lot of veterans in there, and it seems to be working the way it is. So, why then go to another place that, has its own risks? So, I mean, listen, I'm always open to the discussion, but ultimately, there aren't that many captains in general in baseball. I mean, it's not something that happens very often. I think there may be two others in baseball now. So it's not like a thing. Okay. Maybe it's a New York Yankee thing. And so, I think it's, a media driven discussion that maybe, has gotten a little too loud.
Media-driven discussion. Didn't Mendy talk about it in spring training and Lindor talk about it? I guess the media asked the question, so maybe it was media-driven. I think the captaincy thing is completely overrated, and I agree with Steve. It needs to be organic. And right now, everything's working. So when things are working, why change anything? Now, one guy who has not performed to the expectations of many Met fans is Juan Soto. His numbers are, you know what I would say his numbers are? They're Beltran 05-like. If you look back to what Carlos Beltran did in his first year with the New York Mets in 2005. Now, I have pure confidence that will change. He's hit the ball hard plenty. He's also woken up really over the last week or so. Had a very productive series against the Nationals. Hasn't hit a lot of home runs. Hasn't driven in a lot of runs. Isn't shuffling a lot. But I'm not overly concerned. In fact, when they're winning and you're 21-9, it makes it that much sweeter. But Steve was asked about the early season struggles of Juan Soto.
If you ask him, he'd probably say it's not, not going as, what he hoped. That's not what his back of his baseball card would say. But saying that, there's a lot of subtle things that he does that I, really think matters. The way that he works a count, makes pitchers throw extra pitches, really matters. Then he gets on base and then, Pete can drive him in. And so Pete's seen better pitches. And so, it's very subtle how that works. And you just can't just look at it as, in a very narrow sense. And saying that, listen, I'm not worried about Juan. I mean, he is singularly focused on baseball. He's a pure hitter. And, let's have this discussion at the end of the year.
You've obviously spent a lot of money. Payroll is.
Oh, sorry. All right. Sorry, John. Don't mean to cut you off. The great John Heyman, ladies and gentlemen. He is right. Now, ultimately, you are judged by your performance and you're judged by your overall stats and you're judged by your OPS and obviously team success as well. But he's 1,000% right. Juan Soto's impact on this team has already been felt even with a subpar batting average and not enough RBIs. Pete Alonso is having the best stretch of his career. Do we think that having Soto in front of him has nothing to do with it? We think that him being on base after a 8-pitch walk has nothing to do with it. He is being impacted positively by Juan Soto. You know who else is being impacted positively by Juan Soto? Francisco Lindor, who for the first time in forever is actually raking in April. And even the defense. I know he gets a lot of crap for the missunned fly ball, and obviously the fly ball deep right game, one of the Washington series that went off his glove. But how about the runs he saved in the finale against the Phillies with his arm? And he does have a good arm in right field. So it's minor, and this is not to make excuses. Of course, eventually he's got to hit, but I'm a Met fan. I'm not a Juan Soto fan. I'm a Met fan first. I'm a Met fan before I'm a Pete Alonso fan. I'm a Met fan before I'm a Jacob deGrom fan, as much as I love Jake. Like, trust me, I want the Mets to succeed. It'd be great if Jacob deGrom was here winning the Cy Young. It'd be great if Juan Soto was going to win the MVP. But ultimately, and I think most of us feel this way, basically everyone feels this way, I just want to win. And so those things impact on winning. It matters because what's unhealthy to do as a sports fan, and this is with every sport, I'll say this to Knicks fans right now. When you're watching a guy play basketball or baseball, when you're watching them play, not when you're talking about them the next day with your friends at a bar, when you're watching them play, don't think about how much money they're making. Don't think about how many draft picks you gave up for them, because ultimately all that matters is, and this is all that matters, is that guy helping my team win. I will give you a basketball analogy. If the Knicks win an NBA championship, okay, now we know that's not going to happen, but if they do win an NBA championship and Mikal Bridges averages 7 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and has a minimal impact, but he does have an impact, sets a mean screen, plays some defense, and the Knicks win an NBA championship, right? Would you give two craps how many draft picks you gave up for him? Or would you say, I don't care, I won the NBA Finals? No. You would say, I don't care, I won the NBA Finals. So let's use it with us, right? Let's make this simple. If Juan Soto hits 242 this year with 19 home runs, 75 RBIs, and 801 OPS, and has a mediocre postseason, but we're naked on a parade in October because we won the World Series, first in my lifetime, first in a lot of you guys listening's lifetime. Are we going to sit there thinking about how much money Juan Soto makes? It wasn't worth it. If you are, I don't know what to tell you. So I do agree with Steve. He's made a winning impact. One last clip from Cohen, then we'll get to some of your emails, thericob@gmail.com. Steve Cohen was asked about sustained success and bringing the Met fan, you and I, everyone listening to the Rico, that change of us having sustained success, because the Mets never have. Like, if they make the playoffs this year, which better happen, it'll be the first time in the history of the franchise they're in the playoffs 3 times in 4 years. It's never happened. It'll only be the 3rd time they made the playoffs in back-to-back years. So we are already seeing a form of sustained success in the Steve Cohen era, despite the 2 under 500 seasons mixed in 21 and 23. So Steve was asked about sustained success, and listen to what he says about the tortured history of the New York Mets.
I just want to be a record. I couldn't care less about the history. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's irrelevant to me. It means nothing. Okay. And so this is, a new regime, a new management, new beliefs in how we operate. And I like the direction we're going. And a lot of great people in this organization. And we still have a ways to go to continue to build the infrastructure. It doesn't happen just in a couple of years. And so, but we're definitely making progress, and I think you're seeing it. And so I think it's a great combination of great talent. Obviously we have the ability to spend. And so, fans are a little bit, I describe it as they have PTSD. They've had, a tough road over a long period of time, but I don't have it, and I don't think that way. And I'm going to put the best product I can on the field.
So if I played that for you without context, right, and just had you listen to the part where he says, I could care less about the team's history, you would think Jeff Wilpon rebought the team. Like, you would think to yourself, what? You don't care about our history? Obviously, context is king. And the context is not he doesn't care about Doc Gooden, or he doesn't care about George Thomas Seaver, or he doesn't care about Edgardo Alfonso. That is a direct shot at the Wilpon era. And that is a reminder there's a new sheriff in town. And I get it. You don't want to be held responsible for the sins of someone else's past. And that's what he's saying. And he's right. Now, he talks about Met fans having PTSD. He's also right about that. Like, you can't blame me or you or anyone else for thinking back to our history, even if it isn't Steve Cohen's fault. Like, both things can be true. The only way for Steve Cohen to change that is to win. And so far, they're winning. If the New York Mets make the playoffs this season, and they better, I think that's fair to say. That not only at 21-9, but certainly with the preseason expectations and with 3 wildcard teams, which we have to factor in this discussion. They will have made the playoffs in 3 of the 5 seasons Steve Cohen owns the New York Mets. Now, the 2 years they didn't were out-and-out disasters, including one that said Pete Crow Armstrong for Javier Baez. That one looks just awful, but I can't even get annoyed about it. It sucks, but it is what it is. Far worse than Jared Kelnick, who's now in the minor leagues again. But 3 out of 5 and sustained success. And hey, we'll go out and go after a top free agent and we'll bring him in. So he's right when he says it, but it is tough for us as Met fans to forget about our history. Good stuff from Steve Cohen and good stuff from John Heyman and Joel Sherman. They interviewed him on their podcast. Let's get to some of your emails. Ed Flood writes, Tax Pen. It seems like the best way to save our bullpen is the offense just scoring 1 million runs where we can use one reliever and it doesn't matter if they give up a bunch of runs. It's working now, but eventually Mendy's got to push these guys further. Also, with A.J. Minter likely done, why don't we sign David Robertson? I know he's a righty, but if I recall, he had reverse splits and was still very good last year. David Robertson's a fascinating name because he's still out there. He's not retired. He was effective. He can get lefties out with his changeup. Like, you're not wrong. So I would advise, and I'm sure the Mets are, do your research. Tell me if you think he has anything left, and he would not be a bad addition. Obviously, the Mets have some internal options. We talked about Brooks Raley, who's on his way back, probably another month, and even Dednell Nunez, because Dednell Nunez is a guy who, while he hasn't been great at AAA, we can't forget how well he pitched last year. Steven writes, man, it's great to be a Met fan. With a win like Tuesday against the Diamondbacks, while they should never be taken for granted, are these types of wins championship ball clubs play with? Welcome, Kevin Hergert, to the big club. Long live the Rico. I think the defense was championship caliber, that's for sure, when you make plays like that. Mark Gray writes, hey, guys, if Alonso continues to be a prolific slugger for the remainder of his career, would you agree that he'll eventually make the Hall of Fame? Currently, his stats are eerily similar to Harmon Killebrew, who was inducted in 1984. Yeah, they put that graphic up on SNY last night. If Pete eventually ends up in Cooperstown, that would mean the Mets currently have 3 future Hall of Famers in their everyday lineup, Lindor, Soto, Alonso. The only other Met team that had 3 potential Hall of Famers was the 05-11 Mets with Mike Piazza, David Wright, and Carlos Beltran. Beltran might get in soon, but unfortunately, Wright has a long way to go to make it. So this current team may very well be the only Met team with 3 Hall of Famers on it. If MB Pete can keep crushing it, can any of us even imagine the damage this lineup will do if and when Soto starts mashing? I'm not doing the Hall of Fame discussion. I mean, we got a long way to go. I don't think even Lindor is a lock yet. I think he's on his way. I think clearly Soto's on his way. Pete needs to have a few monster years to get in that Hall of Fame discussion. I will say, Mark, the one discussion that is interesting to have, more so than the Hall of Fame, because there's so much more has to happen before we get there, is where this lineup ranks in Mets history. And does it have a chance to be one of the best offenses we've ever seen? 2006 was very special. And don't forget Carlos Delgado. You mentioned the Hall of Famers. Carlos Delgado's numbers look like a Hall of Famer. So when I think of great Met lineups, I love the 99 team when you had Ricky Henderson having a monster year, Fonzie in the prime of his career, Piazza in the prime of his career, Olerud in the prime of his career, Ventura. That was a hell of a lineup. But yeah, this one has a chance to be very, very good. No doubt. Michael writes, it's currently the top of the 6th inning, and Jose Butto has come in for David Peterson. It's hard to find anything to complain about, but we're Met fans, so let me find a way. In all seriousness, the only complaint is the Met starters aren't pitching much past the 5th inning. Can this really hold up, or is that a problem that Carlos isn't pushing the starters into the 6th or 7th inning? David Peterson only threw 85 pitches. Yes, he gave up a run in the 5th, but he had a 7-run lead. If the Mets are going to keep their starters an extra day off, what's wrong with having them pitch 15 to 20 more pitches? Mike in the Bronx. I am good with pushing starting pitchers. Every situation is different, though. Okay? So we got to go case by case. So you want to talk about David Peterson last night? Let's do it. They had a big run. They had a big lead. I'll give you that. His pitch count was only 85. I'll give you that. He looked done. Like, do you really think, based on the way he was throwing, based on the contact against him, based on the fact the heart of the order was coming up, 3rd time around the order, do you think David Peterson was getting through the 6th inning? My guess is no. And if he gets into trouble, and now there's 2 on and nobody out, now you're going to Jose Butto, who just blew a game in a similar spot. Now you're at least giving him a clean inning to try to get his head right with an 8-1 lead, as opposed to here's Jose Butto with an 8-2 lead and 2 on and 1 out. So we have to go case by case. Yes, I'd like the starters to go longer, but we got to go individual performance by individual performance. In the case of David Peterson on Tuesday night, I think he made the right call. Game 2 will feature Brandon Waddell and a bunch of relievers. Game 3 will feature Kodai Senga as the Mets look to continue to roll against the Arizona Diamondbacks. We got a few more Ricos coming up. We'll try to do a drive home, assuming everything goes okay, after the Mets Diamondbacks game on Wednesday night. Oh, by the way, I should mention, it's on our graphic screen on YouTube, but Huascar Brazoban is going to be the opener again. So they're going to run that same strategy they ran a couple weeks ago, where they go Brazoban as the opener, and then they go to their bulk guy. Last time it was Hagenman. My friend on the text chat the other day says they should just call up the Hangman. That's what he called him. The Hangman. Who, by the way, stinks in the minor leagues. Hagenman was great for the Mets in that one performance, but he goes down to the minor leagues, he gives up 6 or 7 runs. So Brazoban will be the opener, and then we'll get a lefty named Brandon Waddell who's going to return to the majors for the first time in 4 years. So we shall see. So we got a few more Ricos coming up. We'll give you our series recap Rico at some point Thursday. That'll be wherever you download your podcast or if you want to check it out on YouTube. Thank you very much for listening, downloading, and subscribing to another brand new edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.